Let's journey back in time to August 1995. Internet Explorer has just been released, beginning a battle of browsers and a war of HTML standards. Speaking of, Garbage released their self-titled album also in August 1995, with both Browser and band giving us the lines, "Not my idea" and "Fix me now." I'll take Garbage's album over IE Quarks Mode any day, because after all, they had the better version 2.0, and today, one is on tour and one is headed for retirement. Which means this week we talk with Mike Rothman from DisruptOps about practical ways to bring security into DevOps practices. In the news segment, a game makes a hash of security, a gym gives a hash of passwords, escape sequences make a name for themselves, All-Star makes a push for all code, some DEF CON highlights, and more. Grab a pink feather boa and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. It's the show to learn the latest tools, techniques, and processes necessary to understand DevOps, application security, and cloud security. Your trusted source for the latest application security news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. We discuss application security a lot on this show, and we know that the implications for code security have become even greater as cloud adoption accelerates software development. Shift Left bridges the gap between security teams and developers to find and fix vulnerabilities accurately from the source. Shift Left Core is an innovation in code security with industry-leading accuracy and speed. It combines next-generation static code analysis, intelligent software composition analysis, secrets detection, security insights, and contextual developer security education in one easy-to-use platform. Learn more and create your free account at securityweekly.com/shiftleft. In any business today, there comes a moment, the moment you realize you can secure the code as fast as you write it. Instead of testing everything, you can just test the right things. It's not about tools, but intelligent risk management. That's the moment you choose Synopsys. Build secure, high-quality software faster. Visit securityweekly.com/synopsis. Looking to improve your web application security? Probly is reinventing web application security. Probly focuses on the vulnerabilities that matter, eliminates false positives with evidence-based scanning, and provides a simple point-and-shoot solution that is easy to use. Probly's thorough coverage ensures accurate identification of vulnerabilities in any modern web application or API. Improve your web application security processes by visiting securityweekly.com/Probly and start your free trial today.
This is episode 162, recorded August 16th, 2021. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with John Kinsella, who I think is only happy when it rains. How is that so, John?
Yeah, when you did that intro, I'm like, ooh, I was thinking about Garbage the Band. I'm like, oh, he's talking about Garbage the Band. Good morning. I'm a fan of Garbage.
Definitely a fan of Garbage, too. Got to see them, of all places, at the Élysée Montmartre in Paris in 1996, one of the best shows I've ever been to. One of, not a show, but one of the best websites you could ever go to is the Cyber Risk Alliance, in partnership with InfraGard, has launched the Critical Infrastructure Resilience Benchmark Study. Measure your readiness for ransomware by completing the survey and getting your score. Visit securityweekly.com/CIRB to take the survey. SC Media debuts its all-new SC Digital Experience, fully integrated with Security Weekly podcast content just like us, and more. The new site increases the scope and scale of original content resources from editorial staff, contributors, and the far-reaching Cyber Risk Alliance network. Visit scmagazine.com to check out the new look. Mike Rothman is a 25-year security veteran specializing in the sexy aspects of security, such as protecting networks, protecting endpoints, security management, compliance, and helping clients navigate a secure evolution in their path to full cloud adoption. In addition to his role at DisruptOps, Mike is an analyst and president of Securosis. Hello, Mike, and thank you for joining us.
Hey, Mike, how are you? You make me kind of sound old in that description, but I prefer experienced. That I think will work out better for us today.
Experience. I did almost read it as a 25-year-old security veteran, which, hey, that's maybe doing compliance and trying to fix all those endpoints and networks can age you pretty.
before security was a thing, right? We've been doing it, so.
It is. Well, now security maybe still is a thing, but security is becoming, with a motto like Shift Left, it's ostensibly becoming a motto for developers too. Security is a thing for developers. We're shifting left. You're more responsible for it. But it's one easy thing just to say, cool, you take care of security now. It's been 25 years. We're giving up and going away. That doesn't really sound like a practical or tangible approach that a security team should be taking. So as we talk about this shift to DevOps and different types of Agile and so on, what can security teams do to have an actual practical impact on development of modern software?
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Is that, and I like to say I've been doing security for well over 25 years, and I've been trying to get out of security for at least 23 of those years by working ourselves out of a job, right? Because what we're trying to do is get security more integrated into the general processes. DevOps is certainly an opportunity to do that as we do shift left, as we kind of think more about infrastructure as code and being able to really embed a lot of these security motions directly into kind of how we build our stack. That's fine. So we clearly say, yes, shift left where you can, but from our standpoint at DisruptOps, it's yes, shift left, but don't forget about what happens on the right. So that gets to a lot of operational motions and making sure that you've got proper both configurations as well as your monitoring for attacks, right? So yes, build it in up front, try to get rid of it, work ourselves out of a job. But the reality is there's always going to be some oversight necessary, and not just from a compliance standpoint, but from an operational security standpoint, that regardless of how we build and deploy this code and these application stacks, that we're always going to have to deal with.
Yeah, totally. And I'm definitely on board with that idea of let's work ourselves out of a job or work ourselves into a different job. But let's do something different because we actually made things better. But in that spirit of making things better or getting these alerts is sort of, you're saying what's going on as on the right-hand side, so to speak, what, applications have been developed. They're living in the cloud, for example. It's one thing to say we need to know what's going on, but if we start to pick that apart, that's where the security team and developers, for that matter, do need to have a conversation of what exactly am I supposed to know? Do I just need to know that we went through a checklist and deployed correctly? Do we need to know that our IAM policy meets some standard, I say in scare quotes? What does the right information kind of look like in this perspective?
So you're mentioning the C word there, right? And, to get your mind out of the gutter, fellows. No, the context word, right? What we need is really a lot of context about what any of these specific alerts mean. And right now, especially as you kind of move towards, and we talk about applications and DevOps, but there's a lot of cloud operational challenges that folks are thinking about now. So a new capability, right, or a new category of technology has emerged known as CSPM, right, Cloud Security Posture Management. And really what it is kind of a new age vulnerability scanner. And like most vulnerability scanners, it generates a report of, 200 some odd pages of crap you're never going to fix, right? So it's like, oh, great, right, kind of into the circular bin from that standpoint, because you're dealing with all sorts of other kind of issues there. So what we're trying to do is get this concept of supplementing just hey, this is the stuff that's broken in your environment with the context to understand how it's broken and really what the impact of that being broken is, so folks can more effectively prioritize and then hopefully at some point get to the point where we're actually automating the remediation of these capabilities. For certain categories or for certain issues, you definitely want to start thinking about how can I automate these repetitive motions. So we provide context. You have to provide, the ability to fix over time, because again, kind of these operational issues are not going to go away regardless of how effective you get at building security into your DevOps process.
So one of the things that also stands out to me is you kind of mentioned, here's a vuln scan, call it an old school vuln scan that just produces pages and pages of stuff that you're supposed to maybe go fix, maybe it's prioritized well. But another challenge, especially when you get into larger organizations, is who do you give this list to? Who's supposed to fix it? Meaning you might have legacy applications, unowned applications. And I would hope in modern cloud environments, the same isn't true. But I suspect I'm being over-optimistic optimistic there. So do you see the same problems of, hey, here's some things to fix, but how do you find the right person who should be fixing that? And are we talking about the security team or the DevOps or development team?
Well, both, Mike. I mean, let's
put a tiny bit of color on that question before you go, Mike.
Oh yeah, go ahead, John.
Is it better or worse than legacy apps?
That's actually a great, kind of clarification, John, because, clearly we would like to optimistically think that we've got, kind of our act together and, kind of we tag everything effectively and we know the owners of both the application stacks and all the resources that are in our environment. And of course, then you kind of intersect with the real world where that definitely doesn't happen. Now, do I think, is it better or worse, to getting to John's point? I do think it's better, because what we have are self-contained application stacks where you kind of know, at least what group is responsible or functionally responsible for a number of these initiatives that are happening, again, within a DevOps motion or in the cloud, or both. From that perspective. But I do think that, finding the actual individual to route the alerts to can be problematic, right? That can certainly be challenging, because it's like, well, is it the security team that's responsible for these things? And the reality is, for a small subset of issues, the answer is absolutely yes, right? So for things that create existential threats to the organization, root account compromises, escalation of privileges, kind of open networks or open storage buckets. I mean, there are some things that we basically call the no-nos, right? They should never happen in your environment. If they do happen, then security is empowered to go and fix those things, right? So shoot first, ask questions later, to use a horrible analogy from that standpoint. But for everything else, and basically everything else is probably 98% of the stuff that you're going to deal with, it has to go through some kind of validation, alerting, kind of routing, and then remediation function. And finding out those responsible parties is a huge challenge. And honestly, the answer to that is the good old fashioned, I got to get up out of my chair and actually figure this out. Right. And that means going to talk to some of the application leaders, going to understand how they want those operational motions to work. Because, the good news with DevOps and cloud is that it's really empowered a lot of application teams to do pretty much everything themselves. And of course, the downside of that is that a lot of these application teams are empowered to do things themselves. Right. So figuring out how they want to work is, again, another aspect of what's important from a security standpoint, is that we've got to work within their operational motions. We can't dictate anymore kind of what those operational motions are going to be. Well, I guess we can, right? But we'll be, kind of barking into the ether, as, I think many have for many years.
And I think an aspect of also kind of what John was I think getting to there too, and what you were saying, Mike, is that perhaps the cloud does have better capabilities to be tracking this, in the sense of being able to decorate our resources, tag them, and having APIs in order to query those tags. So the conceptually, AWS, GCP, Azure, all of those we can put metadata onto these resources. But once again, am I saying this just that we can, but do teams actually do that? And has it made things better? Just this basic capability. So I think maybe my question here is more along the lines of, have you seen this sort of tagging these resources in the spirit of, I own this, this team's own that, this team owns that, et cetera? Or is there a way that teams can adopt this kind of strategy early on to be successful?
You absolutely want to see organizations kind of adopt, an effective tagging structure as they get going in the cloud. Does that happen? No. So what you're doing is you're constantly retrofitting things. Then you'll have a new application team that, kind of starts coming in and doesn't really play well in the sandbox with everybody else. So it's a constant, kind of push and pull from that standpoint. But I do believe that we are making progress operationally in terms of trying to build a lot of these environments for both isolation, right? Because from a security standpoint, that's absolutely critical, so that if I lose one environment or one application stack, it doesn't impact everything else, but also for scale. right? So how can I achieve operational scale? How can I leverage a lot of the things that happen or are enabled by the cloud? And Mike, you had mentioned APIs and the ability to pull, aggregate, analyze, and then act, on both the metadata and the actual resources in a more automated fashion. So all of those things are good. But again, with this power, right, with this capability comes increased risk. So think about it as, yes, whereas we were kind of always on a tightrope in traditional IT, when you fell, maybe you fell 5 feet. Right. Now we're kind of in the cloud and maybe we've got, 2 or 3 feet to, kind of walk around because we've got better operational tools. We've got better ability for visibility. We've got better tagging across everything. If you screw it up, it's a lot further to fall. Right. Because, if you open up stuff, if you make something overly permissive, it's not just your internal resources or possibly your data center that can access this stuff. It's pretty much everybody. So higher risk, but easier operational environments if you do the right stuff. And that's one of the things that, kind of we've been working on with a lot of our clients and kind of really kind of trying to espouse in the industry is the importance of these structured operational motions, understanding a lot of that intelligent alerting and who is supposed to get, the contextual information for when either attacks or misconfigurations are found in your environment. And then ultimately, how can I get that into a remediated motion? So you're not just generating a 200-page report of things that are broken. You're not just finding those issues. You're also giving the customer the ability to fix them, again, within their own operational motion, which may involve any amount of automation. You just don't know, right? Every customer is going to get there in their own time.
So one of the themes you're just saying right now is a lot of that operational aspect. And to me, it sounds like, it's in the name, right? DevOps. DevOps is the ones responsible for the cloud, for deploying into the cloud, the engineering designs, principles behind it, et cetera. So deploying a tool like this, how have you seen some good strategies or how have you seen the organizations you work with approach this in the sense of here is security doing all the operational work to build this up, stand this up, et cetera? Or are they collaborating, hopefully, some positive, constructive way, working with the DevOps team as the folks with ops in their name to have this operational / burden / responsibility?
Yeah, that's so how you onboard and take on any kind of operational tool will really be kind of contingent on the culture and the ability of the security team to, really work with a lot of the operational teams. What we tend to see is very much a crawl, walk, run type of approach. And by crawl, we mean just give us some visibility, right? So we'll connect into the cloud environment. We'll tell you what's busted. We'll get you the information that you need without, any expectation that we would automate some of those fixes. As they, start to walk, they take a handful of the higher priority issues or more damaging, more risky issues, and then start to look to, kind of automate some of those operational motions. And then when you're running, then it's really about what else can I automate? And that involves a decent amount of customization, kind of working the operational motions for how the organization wants to work, working the alerting motions for those things that you don't feel comfortable with operationalizing from that perspective. So it's really all over the gamut. But what is absolutely most critical is that partnership that you kind of mentioned, right? The security folks working hand in hand with the development or the operation folks or both, right? So that security becomes really embedded within the environment, that you've always got that continuous visibility. You're always, again, paying attention to the right. Clearly we want to shift left, but we can't ignore the right. So ensuring that you are on top of those operational environments and then, really working in collaboration with the rest of the teams so that security can do what security should be doing, which is providing oversight, setting policies and enforcing those policies in very limited situations where, again, it creates an undue or unacceptable risk to the organization.
So it sounds like you're describing, in a way, two paths. One at the very end, they're a bit more explicit on that aspect of governance oversight for the security team. But there was a subtler aspect of security just becoming part of the engineering team. And maybe they are security-focused engineering, but they're helping that partnership with DevOps, and they're taking on that, let's build something, let's be operational. And I'm curious, does that sound, am I hearing you right in that sort of, two paths diverging for security folks? And does that seem like a smart way for folks to go down?
So we get in both my capacity as, kind of an executive at Disruptos, but also, kind of with my gadfly hat on at Securosis, I get asked a lot about, kind of what do we focus on? Security is so exciting and hot, and I want assured employment forever. What should I focus on? And it was funny, right? How things kind of come full circle. Well, probably 15 years ago, I started talking about application security. Ergo, Application Security Weekly, right, about how important it was to start to embed, kind of testing and capabilities for security within the application stack. And we've come full circle now, in that I think the most effective security professionals moving forward don't have to be developers, to be clear, but they do have to understand development. They do have to understand scripting. We do have to understand automation, because those are going to be the capabilities that are going to become embedded within these application stacks. And that's going to be driven by the folks that want to roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, and actually do stuff. And then there's kind of that other path, which is more policy, oversight, governance, guidance. We don't, kind of mention that too much, but there's always an important aspect at the beginning of any SDLC for an organization, which is training the developers, training the operations people in terms of what security means, how to embed it into their environment, kind of how do you know when you've done it right? How do you know when you've done it wrong? Just a lot of those things that we don't get coming out of the womb in terms of how to do kind of technology in a secure fashion, as opposed to this discipline of bolting security onto the stuff that we already have moving forward. So what we really want to see is both. Right? We want to have security embedded within the environment. And that means, security folks, they may not even be security folks anymore, right? They may be protectors that work within these application, development teams and or operational teams. And we also have kind of that more traditional oversight security role, which is really about governance, about reporting, about compliance, about policies, and about education.
You're reminding me of, we've got an article coming up in the news. I think it's from CSO Mag. Someone talking about, how developers should be logging in their applications, right? Which it sounds like such a basic thing, but really it can be fairly, for those of us who have that operational background, or you've had to troubleshoot something at 3:00 in the morning, we appreciate logs. But it got me thinking. That's something that I don't think anyone teaches in college, right? It's like that's one of those things you learn when you bump your shin type thing. So the question back to you, sort of thinking about that, is there something you'd love to see? Is there like a single thing you'd love to see developers come out of college with?
Wow, that's an open-ended question, John. Yeah, there's a lot of things I would love to see
around application security.
No, I know, but it's just just developers are all tech folks. I mean, I do think that kind of how to engage and when to engage scanners within your kind of DevOps process is absolutely critical. And that kind of involves from template land, right? Well into kind of the development piece of that, as well as kind of throughout the rest of the pipeline to make sure that you are adhering to these specific policies. Writing kind of good unit tests to test for some security, kind of issues. Again, I think that's a very underappreciated and underutilized capability on the part of the dev team. And logging, right? Instrumentation. Let's call it instrumentation, right? Because it's not just from a security standpoint. It also, you have a whole bunch of folks that are interested in the performance characteristics of a lot of these modules, a lot of these code snippets, a lot of these microservices. And really, and especially as we move towards more serverless type motions, this observability, both from an operational performance and security standpoint, becomes absolutely critical. So understanding how do I actually start to build some of this logging into, or instrumentation into my stacks from the get-go is important, but how much, right? Where, and also operationally, where do I put the stuff? Because as we move towards things like serverless or, kind of auto-scaled environments, I mean, you just have ephemeral resources, right? Here 1 second, gone the next. How do I make sure I don't lose that telemetry? So it's a lot of these more operational disciplines that I think they're so interested in making sure folks can, complete the hello world, kind of aspect of their education. They don't think about the operational requirements of doing some of these things at scale.
Great points.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because you're talking a lot about where we're going to as well. And it sounds like, I'm going to guess, developers are still forging ahead onto serverless, onto whatever the newest, latest, coolest cloud technology is, or containerization technology for that matter. And security maybe is just catching up, and just especially if you're just talking about, we need visibility, we just need to see what's going on. We haven't even talked about like designing guardrails, designing secure architectures as well. So if we put our hats on and look towards the future, in our time traveling theme here, what does the future hold for, whether it's visibility or just this principle of shifting security onto development team, and how the security teams can do that in actually helpful ways?
I think that we are making progress, right? The tools are better, and I think folks are starting to understand a lot of these operational motions. The future is clearly going to be unevenly distributed, right? Lots of kind of tech quotes around that. You are definitely going to have the folks that get it, have made the investments, kind of do have integrated processes and motions and have embedded security into their environment. You've got a whole bunch of other folks that aren't going to do that until they absolutely have to. So to John's point, they don't do this stuff until they, kind of hit their shin. And let's hope that that's the worst of the impact that happens to some of these organizations. I suspect we're going to see a lot more high profile issues along that front. But in general, security is going to be behind. Let's be very clear about that, because in a lot of cases, the incentive and the imperative on the part of these teams is to innovate and is to bring out new capabilities and new features, leveraging new capabilities of both DevOps, cloud, new types of applications, new types of capabilities. And nobody is going to sit there and say, well, let's see what security has to say about that. Right? That's never happened. I don't think that's going to happen in the future. So the closer we can get into the process, right, embedded into the process, the more likely it is that we're not horrifically behind, that we're just a bit behind, and that we can actually, again, I'm never going to say catch up, right, but that we can sort of keep pace with kind of the innovative capabilities that we constantly see introduced into the tech stack. So it's, again, I don't think it's possible to, get out ahead of it. We've been trying for, I don't know, I've been doing this 25, 30 years at this point. I don't think that's going to happen. But if we can kind of shorten that time frame that we're behind, I think everybody wins in that case.
No, that makes sense, and especially in that aspect of keeping up, and different organizations are going to have different levels of maturity just to be able to do that. So I'm curious too. So for those orgs that do have perhaps the better maturity and they're keeping pace, or at least they're following along that innovation at a healthy rate, and what would be the next step then beyond just visibility? Meaning we have at least, I still have to use my scare quotes to say we have a decent visibility of our network, or we think we know where everything is. What's sort of a next step after we have a decent inventory, if you will?
Yeah, I think, kind of we tend to, again, continue to follow that crawl, walk, run type of concept. So once you've got decent visibility over what's happening in your environment, then you start to look, and again, it's based upon priorities. Right? What could do a lot of damage in my environment? What are the things that I can do to both identify that faster? Right. So I've got my visibility. So what kind of either event-driven analysis do I need? This event happens, this could represent significant malicious activity. What do I do? Right. So then you get back into that traditional security architecture, security operations motion, which is given this trigger, what happens then, and how do I automate that and make it as quickly accessible as possible. So what we see for those folks that are getting a little bit further ahead, both from an integration, organizationally and culturally, we do start working with them on how do you start staging some of these operational motions so that, and again, we're not talking about 10,000, things that you have to do. How about like a dozen? Start with a dozen, the stuff that, again, will create very significant issues within your environment. Fix those up front. Make sure that you have an automated motion, that you're comfortable with that automated motion. Move on to the next one. So very much an iterative wash, rinse, repeat concept where, take the next thing that, again, will kill you if it happens in your environment. Figure out, again, who has to be notified of this thing? How do I collapse, the amount of time it takes from discovering that to the time where I can either quarantine it, remediate it, and or in some other way address that specific issue. But it gets back to, again, incremental process. I can't stress that enough. Right? We're not going to boil the ocean. We're not going to get everything done in one fell swoop. This is a journey, right? And what it means is we've got to have visibility up front. We have to know, kind of what the things that'll kill us are, trigger those, figure out what the operational motion is going to be, wash, rinse, repeat. And over time, right? And remember, you can leverage a lot of these things across all of your different tech stacks. So over time, you really do improve not just your security posture, but your ability to handle the inevitable issues that happen in your environment by taking this, again, very iterative approach.
That sounds wonderful. It's a great plan. And unfortunately, we also have the inevitable issue of running up to the end of the segment here. But I love the idea that there was no nihilism in there. It was that very much to basically repeat what you said: crawl, walk, run. Start that trend of improvement, and that trend will actually get you to a good place. So, any other final thoughts for us, Mike, as we start to wrap up here?
Yeah, always a pleasure, right? And I think that it's important, especially for folks that spend all or most of their time with developers or in DevOps processes. It really is about starting to integrate and think about, as John said, instrumentation, right? What information do we need? Start to think about those operational motions in terms of for things that will kill us. How do we start to, kind of collapse and shorten that window of exposure and really just understand and be very pragmatic about the reality that this is a process, it is a journey, and we're not going to get there overnight. But if we don't start, we'll never get there. So things like tagging, kind of making sure that you can get the alerts to the right folks and integrating a lot of the, kind of testing environment to shift left. But as always, don't ignore the right. Shift left, don't ignore the right. And that's kind of what we'd leave you with today.
I think that's great words to leave us with. Thanks again, Mike, for joining us. Also want to thank John and thank all of our listeners hanging out with us in the Discord channel as well. If you'd like to learn more about DisruptOps, visit securityweekly.com/DisruptOps. We're going to take a quick break now and return with news of the week.